And welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Julie Jackson. She's a soprano singer. Julie, it's a pleasure to have you on today on Living in the 21st Century.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sure. Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. I'm Julie Jackson. I am currently based in Houston, Texas. I am an operatic soprano professionally. And so I've been singing, primarily classical singing since I was quite young. I have my bachelor's and master's degree both in vocal performance, and I sing around my area and around the country, and I love it.
It's beautiful. Well, that's a great achievement. Well, now we basically give an explanation of who you are. I want to ask you this question. Where do you see yourself as an artist in the coming years? I mean, opera, some parts of the country is very up and going, and then in some parts it's not. But I found recently, like shows like American Got Talent and American Idol, you find young people come and sing in opera, and they're doing a fantastic job. It's not as popular as secular, ordinary secular music. And can people make a good, viable career out of opera? Or
Yes, it is quite difficult because, again, we are always reaching out to audiences and fighting against stereotypes about what we do. And so the minute someone hears opera, they think, a helmet with horns and a bigger woman and, a lot of vibrato and things that they probably cannot mesh with very well. But I encourage people to really get into it on the story level. One of the things that keeps me coming back and keeps me engaged as an artist is just telling the stories and telling it in a way that makes sense to not only me, but the audiences that are coming to see the show. And so it's a really great opportunity to be able to perform for audiences and portray the characters as something that's living and as current, as something that they can get used to. So, we look at soap operas every day, and and so many of these very dramatic kind of melodrama storylines, that's what opera is. And people love drama, and people love to be taken into a story. And that's exactly what opera is. So I think it is on us as artists to come to this public and say, we know that you have these stereotypes in your mind, but do give us a chance. I promise you can relate to this. And then just giving little by little and drawing people into our world. And once they see our passion in the stories that we present, I think it'll be, I think it can continue being popular.
I was a lover of classical and even the operas for a long time. I like people like Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Mozart, and the list goes on. But we have a guy by the name of Andre Roy and also Andre Brocoli, I think that's his name. And I found that in Andre Roy, he has a lot of large concerts, and I can only see like one black person performing in these large, massive audiences. But she is great. She is great. And I'm wondering, when would we see more aspiring black people get involved in this form of the arts? Their talent is good, but you mentioned one important thing earlier is that their size. What would you advise? I mean, it's wrong to discriminate against size and that kind of stuff, but what would you say to a young black lady who wants to come up and be an opera singer or even in sopranos or whichever part of the music she's going to perform in? What level of advice would you let her know is very important to maintain good eating habits? Well, not only for music, but for anything. So to play that part, because I recognize that these ladies are like Miss Universe. they're nice, beautiful young ladies, and this is not to contradict other people, because everyone is beautiful in their own way, but in terms of managing their weight and looking for that part, because let's face reality, the world is one discriminating place, not just blacks against whites or whites against blacks, but every human being has some level of negative judgment in them. And we don't want these to be prohibiting factors from a young person growing up and making their way through the arts, whether it's in opera, whether it's in soprano, but just give them the right guidelines that they can follow and make something great of themselves.
Oh, sure. First off, I would definitely say to that person that they are not alone in this field. It does look like, there's only a couple of us in the field, and that is very not true. And so I would definitely point that person toward online resources such as the Facebook and Instagram page, Black Women in Opera. We have Black Men in Opera that are both on Instagram. We have an organization called the Black Opera Singers of America, BOA. And that also really has taken a form since 2020 to represent the interest and, visibility of Black people in the classical arts, especially Black singers. And so when you come through to it, you come to see that there are so many talented, beautiful artists that are Black that are doing this work. And so we are still fighting for visibility. Unfortunately, one of the things that we have to fight against is this idea that diversity and color on stage means a lack of quality. And that is just not true. For whatever reason, there are people that think, I'd love to see more Black people on stage, or I'd love to see more people of color on stage, but we have a standard, and I would push against that because color does not equal lack of quality. Okay. And so that is definitely something that I've seen that we are still working to push against. As far as one's health, just being yourself, and you yourself will know what you need for your health. Again, looks are not everything, obviously, but we do have discrimination. Okay. Of course. When it comes to that, ultimately it is the quality of the voice and your ability as an artist that will shine through no matter what you look like, though. So, anyone who is wanting to do this, definitely invest in acting, definitely invest in your voice lessons, and bring forth the character and bring forth your voice first. And then everything else will come into place. That what we come and do is bringing artistry to our audiences and to the people. And that is ultimately first before any of the other commercial aspects. You have your whole life and the entire world is telling you all these things to make you need to be skinny or need to, go on a diet or need to run or anything. Okay. These things are very prevalent already. Truly don't focus on that. You need to focus on the art and communicating first. And then all those other things will come into place, in my opinion.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that it's like still some form of struggle to get the exhibition of the Black talent out there. Could you explain what you mean by struggling in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of talented Black and people of color or BIPOC people who go up for a lot of roles and go up for things, but for whatever reason, they may not be chosen by, the gatekeepers of our field. And so sometimes whenever you do see, the season announcements for certain companies or for young artist programs, sometimes all you see are people who don't look like you. And so that kind of gives out this idea of, we, Black people, don't do this art. And that isn't true. And so especially since 2020, the killing of George Floyd and things like that, people have really been trying to say, listen, we want to bring Black people are here. We're ready to do the work. We are capable of doing the work. Please include us in your seasons. Please include us, whenever you are hiring people, because it's not as if to say that we're not present or there's not enough of us. We're just not being featured. And so there definitely is that disconnect between the people who are showing up to audition and who are ready to do the work and the people who are chosen to represent.
Yes,
and
because you just mentioned that there's so much talent among Black folks now in opera and soprano, and they're doing extremely well. But yet still, when there comes up for auditions, something just in equalizing out. Then if they're doing that well, verbally speaking, with voice training, and they're performing well, what you think is that issue that they can't get major roles or even more into that field? Is it because it's already saturated by highly skilled professional whites that was there for a long time? Or is it that we just have to bring on one or two to make it look like we are not biased in any form? How do you see it from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's varied. I think there's a little bit of that as well. Unfortunately, there are people who are donors or kind of big name money who are slow to wanting to see change in their organizations. And some of those people sit on the boards of opera companies, or they are major donors, or they are supporters. And for whatever reason, they are still quite slow to accept multiple faces of color in their organizations.
Right.
And so, that is a challenge in making those people still feel comfortable enough to want to support the organization, and then also being committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. And so there's places where there are people who want to do more, but they know their boards won't support more progressive action. So they are in a bit of a bind.
Okay. So do you see a situation where a group of Black intellectuals or intelligent people who may have some money, there are quite a few Black people out there who are millionaires and have money to invest, could the Black group just form their organization and try to develop some form of a more independent way of getting things done, where they have their own opera company or symphony, classical, whichever one you want to call it? Could some of, because I see it in my eyes. I listen to classical and opera regularly, and I watch a lot of concerts, and once in a blue moon, and believe me, when you do see a Black person performing amongst these people, they are already Black established millionaires in their own professional singing field already. So the small folks, like people who are now coming up through the ranks and who are great with what they're doing, doesn't get that breakthrough. And that somewhat made me think, because like yourself, you would have just spent a whole lot of money in the arts, studying at college and university. And unless you get yourself in a well-established organization, chances are you may not have a career to really fulfill your student loan, to have it repaid, and you just have a talent there doing nothing with. If you go and sing, maybe just a gig, or you may just do it for free to keep your talent intact. And that's what I'm looking at. I think a person should be able to mind a career, take care of themselves by the talent that they possess. You can't tell a person how to spend their money, who to select and not to select. But I believe that intelligent people like yourself should be in a position to see how best you can bring a group of Black people together and start a company, one way or the other. Have you ever given that any thought?
And these are things that are already happening. In my city here, we have Ebony Opera Guild, which is a company that was founded, many years ago, but it does very regularly feature Black singers and African-American composers and programs. I'm thinking also of places like Exigence, which is another company that does a lot, that features a lot of Black singers and instrumentalists in their doings. We have, you know, the Black Opera, like BOA, which is Black Opera Association. They also do a lot of work with existing companies in having them understand, okay, what are the numbers? When you say that you're committed to, you know, bringing more Black people on, how can you actually incorporate that into your existing organization? Like, what does it actually look like to support and bring that commitment to Black people through, you know? And so there's still a lot of things that are going on to make it happen, basically. So instead of people just saying, this is what we want, there are a lot of things that are already in the works to make sure that folks that are having this talent already in the present can be featured. There has been a recent resurgence to fund I believe it's the American Negro House or the Negro Opera House. I believe that's in Philadelphia. And so that had been sitting kind of idle for many decades. And there recently has been a resurgence to reopen it and get it back started on the ground floor. So things are definitely happening to make that happen and to bring opportunities and people forward so that it doesn't just look like, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, a white sea of faces.
That sounds good. I want to juggle your mind a little bit on a different topic, not to take you away from this interview. Nothing. I'm going to lead so that I don't confuse your brain, right? I think you're familiar with the Roe versus Wade situation presently. You have any ideas of that? All right.
Yes.
Now, I want to look beyond just a woman having an abortion or for some gynecological reason. But let's say that here's a young, promising, aspiring young lady, good with talent, opera, soprano. She's good, all right? And she, for some reason, got pregnant through the form of ancestry, where a family member probably raped her or something like that. She becomes pregnant. Now, that in itself is a mental trauma. But she loves her career singing. She wants to get rid of this baby if she possesses this baby. And the child probably would have posed some threat to her life in one form or the other. Ancestry alone is terrible. How would a young lady in this situation, and this question, give it a good thought before you answer it because it's difficult, but I'm trying even myself to figure it out. How would a young lady in a situation like this, who are so good and powerful with her talent, want to get out there to express herself and singing and so forth, now have a matter like this where the highest law of the land, the Supreme Court of the land, law of the land, now prohibit her from making a decision that she could continue with her life?
Yeah.
What impact do you think that will have on her life?
I definitely think it would have a giant impact. Part of that law that is, this is a law that was a constitutional right.
Of course.
First of all, that is no longer available. Mm-hmm. So this is a constitutional right that has been taken away. And something like that, you know, after having almost 50 years of this constitutional right, it now no longer is an option. Mm-hmm. And so it really does fall into each individual state. Mm-hmm. And, you know, depending on where this hypothetical person lived, they may have equitable options or they very much may not. It also falls to class as well. I mean, it depends on how much access to resources this person might have to, you know, take certain steps once they know what situation they are in. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes incredibly more complicated from that because as we now know, it's no longer an issue of privacy between that person, their situation, and their doctor. Now, the government and state legislatures, you basically have to include them in something that truly should be a private matter.
Sorry, I asked you that question because you're a great aspiring artist out there in the opera field, and there will be a lot of young Black women looking up to you. And sometimes it's the people who they look up to that they depend on getting good advice. Would you advise young women in this time to be more cautious, be more protective in what they do, be more vigilant? What kind of advice would you want to give young women considering all these things that are now happening?
Absolutely. I think every woman is already so cautious anyway. Being a woman already means having to be careful about who you talk to, especially when it comes to the opposite sex, or who you allow around you, and, being so hyper aware already. And so this just adds yet another layer of difficulty to the situation. And so, again, it depends on the states and where they are, but there are a lot of networks that pre-existed the overturning of this rule that will help and can help if you find yourself in a situation like this. Lately, I've heard that there's been some federal push to make birth control over the counter. So as far as access to things like contraceptives, that seems to be a good push to make that accessible for everyone anywhere, no matter where they are. It's definitely something that, it's a little bit more on the brain. And so, there's definitely things that may not go in the favor of maybe the folks that they encounter every day. And so sometimes as a woman, you encounter things like, oh, I can't believe this. Like, you won't talk to me just because X, Y, and Z. And it's just like, hey, you might encounter people who are, making their boundaries around their person a little bit more tight. And that might not be okay with some of their partners or anything, but in this climate, maybe that's what's going to end up happening.
I want to just turn back to the performing arts and so forth. Do you think that opera, the establishment of opera, had built a foundation for many musical forms of engineering? This was a conversation many years where people believed that it was from out of opera or classical that different forms of music and art forms had been created. What's your opinion on that?
I can definitely see that, because opera goes so far back to centuries before, and it comes from this idea of the Greek chorus and bringing music. So the idea of an opera is a play that is sung throughout. Okay. And so there's no dialogue that's just by itself. It's all put to music and it's all sung from beginning to end. Okay. And so from out of there, you definitely get different kinds of musical expression that come from that. So I can definitely see why people feel that way. It's one of those things that is, so integral to the human want to tell stories and to express themselves, through theater and through song, really. So, yeah, I could definitely see that.
Okay. Would you advise young people in school today that the restoration, I want to use the word restoration because since the 1960s, when opera was so vibrant, matter of fact, I think there's where so opera came from. When Procter & Gamble want to advertise their products, they find some opera singer to sing and advertise it. So I think that's where the so opera really came into play. When would you advise young people today to get back into this form of music, this art form, since it's powerful, and it's a language unto its own self. There were a time where even doctors in Russia were practicing surgery. Rather than giving anesthesia, they was using classical music as a form to sedate the person, which I don't know if you heard about that, but that was reality. And so I'm wondering, would you encourage young people today to get back into that art form? It can be a nice, rewarding career. Speak to their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And today is even better than before, because we have technology that, like YouTube and Spotify and, Apple Music and all these, where you can access this music without having to either go to a library or know someone who has a collection that you can borrow, for example. So you can get into it, know it with your own understanding. And so for me, I know I love to go to YouTube and just type in, you can type in opera standards, for example, and then go from there. If you're interested in Black singers, you can type in Black opera singers or, YouTube, and scroll and just become and discover, from Leontine Price to Rary Grease to Angel Blue to, Denise Graves, all these singers who may not be recognizable, I guess, to young people right away, but Google and YouTube and things like that are your really best friend when it comes to those things. Again, I would also look to social media. Like I said before, there is Black Women in Opera that's on Instagram, and I think they're on TikTok as well. And Black Men in Opera, that's also on Instagram and probably on TikTok as well. And they are constantly